Beneath a ruined city, buried deep in forgotten tunnels where even silence seems to breathe, two explorers uncover a secret that was never meant to be found, a truth so ancient and powerful, it begins to awaken the shadows themselves. If you think history is just in the past, think again. What they find could rewrite everything we know, or destroy it all. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show a little love by giving this video a thumbs up. Now, let's dive into this wonderful and chilling story, Beneath the Silence. The grand chamber of the Zarnak Dominion pulsed with quiet tension. Deep beneath the mountain-sized fortress on their capital planet, the Dominion's highest council gathered around a long, arched table of polished obsidian. Towering banners hung from the ceiling, marked with symbols of countless conquered worlds. The air was thick with pride and certainty, until the doors creaked open and silence fell. Mirek Val entered slowly, leaning on a cane made of reinforced alloy, his posture stiff with age but his eyes alert, glowing with a cold blue light. He was once a commander feared across the stars, known for leading the Dominion's most successful planetary campaigns. Now, he was mostly forgotten, replaced by newer, hungrier minds. As he stepped forward, his faded uniform was a quiet symbol of years long gone, the medals across his chest a reminder of a past few still respected. "Why summon the relic?" someone muttered, and low laughter rippled across the room. Sitting at the head of the table was Torvin Krell, the newly appointed High Commander. His armor shimmered crimson under the low lighting, polished and proud. Unlike Mirek, Torvin had never known defeat. He had never seen true fear, and he wore his confidence like a weapon. "You have a report, Elder?" Torvin asked, voice laced with sarcasm. "Or is this another one of your old ghost stories?" Mirek didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his voice firm, though quiet. "This is no story. It is a warning." Torvin leaned back in his seat, waving one hand lazily for him to continue. Around the table, other commanders smirked or rolled their eyes, certain that nothing this ancient soldier could say would matter. Mirek took a slow breath. 3 years ago, he began, I led a Dominion fleet to a small planet, Earth. Intelligence claimed it was disorganized, technologically weak and divided. A perfect target, he paused. We were wrong. Snickers echoed through the chamber. One of the younger generals muttered, "The humans again?" But Mirek's tone sharpened, forcing the room back into stillness. They fought like no species I've ever encountered. Not for territory, not for pride. They fought to survive. That makes them dangerous. He turned, looking each commander in the eye. We outnumbered them 5-1. Their weapons were outdated. Their ships were smaller. But their minds, he tapped his temple. They adapt. They turn their weaknesses into weapons. They trap you in your own confidence. Torvin stood up slowly, voice mocking. You expect us to believe that a backwater planet barely reaching interstellar capability held off a Dominion fleet? They didn't just hold us off, Mirek said. They let us leave. They spared my ship, so I could tell the others, so I could carry the message. Don't come back. The room fell silent. It wasn't just what Mirek said, it was how he said it. Calm, certain. Like a man who'd looked into something terrifying and lived just long enough to speak of it. But Torvin wasn't swayed. So they played mind games, clever, but that was then. They'll crumble under real pressure. Mirek shook his head. You don't understand. They aren't like us. We train for war, they survive it. You mistake peace for weakness. You mistake chaos for failure. They're unpredictable, and they learn fast. A young officer named Kale, quiet until now, shifted in his seat. If they're so dangerous, he asked carefully, why aren't they expanding across the stars? Because they're not conquerors, Mirek answered. They don't seek control. But when pushed, when their people are threatened, they become something else entirely. Not an empire, not an army, a force. Torvin rolled his eyes. Enough. This council meets to approve and advance on their outer colonies, not to listen to an old man's regrets. It's not regret, Mirek said. It's memory. 1. I hope none of you will have to carry The council resumed its business as if Mirek had vanished into air. One by one, the commanders voted for invasion. Torvin gave the final approval, slamming a seal into place on the holographic console. The council adjourned. Mirek stood alone by the dark window that overlooked the stars. Kale approached him quietly, glancing to make sure no one noticed. "Do you really believe we'll lose?" he asked. Mirek's voice was soft but steady. "This isn't about winning or losing, it's about surviving what's coming." Kale didn't reply. He simply nodded, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Mirek behind, staring out at the stars. And somewhere, far from the Dominion, Earth watched silently. New Terra was a symbol of hope. Built on the edge of explored space, it stood as humanity's greatest colony. Tall silver towers reaching for the sky, green energy fields humming gently beneath the surface, and bustling streets full of families, workers, and dreamers. It was a place meant for peace and progress. But peace has a way of ending without warning. The attack came at dawn. The sky shifted from its usual soft blue to a deep, burning red as Zarnak warships pierced the atmosphere. Their engines screamed like dying stars, and within seconds, the city's defense alarms rang out in desperation. Civilians looked up, confused and afraid. Then came the first strike, an explosion so loud it shattered windows across an entire district. Flames rose where homes had stood only moments before. Commander Alina Rowe sprinted through the command post, her eyes sharp and jaw clenched. She had been stationed on New Terra for 5 years. She knew every defense protocol, every weak spot, and every evacuation route. But nothing in her training could prepare her for the sheer speed of the Zarnak assault. Their ships moved like shadows, dropping fire onto every major structure. Hospitals, power stations, transport hubs. Nothing was spared. "Get that signal." "Out now!" she shouted to her communications team as she threw herself into the operations chair. Panels flickered. One operator was crying but still typing. Another had blood running down his temple, refusing to stop until the message was sent. Alina grabbed the microphone, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "This is Commander Rowe of New Terra. We are under full assault. Immediate support required. Civilians are falling. Repeat, we need reinforcements, now." Explosions rocked the building. Dust and sparks rained from the ceiling. The message was sent. But Alina knew they wouldn't last long. Far away in the void of space aboard the human warship Silverlight, Captain Darius Holt listened as the transmission played. His face remained expressionless, but his eyes narrowed with growing intensity. A war veteran, Darius had seen cities fall before. He had seen brave people die trying to save them. But something in Alina's voice, something in the sound of that destruction made him stand up and speak with sharp authority. "Set course for New Terra. All units prepare for combat. We leave no one behind." As the ship turned toward the burning colony, alarms flared and red lights pulsed through the corridors. Soldiers raced into position, engineers ran final checks, and the hum of charging weapons echoed like a storm approaching. Darius stood on the bridge, his hands behind his back, his thoughts racing. He remembered what the old strategist Mirek had once said during a private council session no one had taken seriously. Now those words rang louder than ever. They won't attack the way you expect. On New Terra, the streets were drowning in smoke. Families clung to each other, trying to reach the shelters. Drones flew overhead, trying to offer direction through the rubble, but many had already been destroyed. In one narrow alley, a young communications officer named Jonah crawled through shattered glass and broken stone. His transmitter was crushed, the signal disrupted, but he clutched a small backup device like it was his last hope. With trembling fingers, he activated it and whispered into the mic, "This is Jonah Vell. If anyone hears this, New Terra is falling. Evacuation is no longer an option. We need more than help, we need vengeance." The signal reached Silverlight just as the fleet exited warp near the outer rim. Darius heard Jonah's voice. He closed his eyes for one quiet second. Then, without turning, he spoke to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Orla Bryn. Send the response teams, protect the survivors, then we hit them where it hurts. Within minutes, smaller human ships launched from the fleet, racing through space like bolts of light. The main vessel began coordinating with ground resistance, targeting weak points in the Zarnak attack. The enemy had expected confusion. What they met was coordination, unity, and a sudden shift in momentum. Back on New Terra, Commander Rowe fought her way out of the collapsing command post. Covered in dust and with a bloodied arm, she looked to the sky. For a moment she saw them, glimmers of hope piercing the red clouds. Human ships. Thank you, she whispered under her breath, though she wasn't sure who she was thanking. The Zarnak commander overseeing the attack, General Krez, watched from his ship's observation deck, amused. They send reinforcements? Interesting, he muttered with a grin. Let's see what they're really made of. But he underestimated the humans. Everyone always did. As the ground battles erupted and the humans began pushing back, the Zarnak found themselves facing resistance that adapted faster than expected. Their airships were shot down by coordinated fire. Their supply lines were sabotaged by local resistance. What was meant to be a quick conquest was turning into a grinding battle, and this was just the beginning. Captain Darius Holt watched the battlefield unfold on the screen, his voice steady as stone. This isn't about saving a colony anymore. This is the start of something bigger. He turned toward Orla, his eyes like steel. Prepare the fleet. We're taking the war to them. The stars above flickered like silent witnesses as the war expanded beyond New Terra. The Zarnak Dominion, once confident in their sweeping victory, now found themselves tangled in a conflict that was shifting out of their control. The humans were not retreating. They were organizing. They were not panicking. They were learning. And deep in the heart of space, strategies began to echo louder than any weapon. Lieutenant Varric Sohn stood on the bridge of the Zarnak cruiser, Vindicator, his jaw tight and brow furrowed. What had started as a simple invasion was unraveling. Their forces were scattered across several human colonies, each mission planned with mathematical precision. Yet things weren't going as expected. Communications were failing without cause. Targeting systems were glitching in critical moments. Supply ships were disappearing without a trace. None of it made sense. Across the war table, General Torvin Krell slammed his fist down, the impact shaking the room. This is sabotage. The humans are interfering with our systems. Find out how and stop it. Technicians scurried to respond, but none had answers. Their pride in Zarnak technology had left no room for doubt, yet something was clearly working against them. Varric watched it all unfold, unease twisting in his stomach. He thought back to the old strategist Mirek Val's warning, the one he'd brushed off like everyone else. But now it lingered like a shadow behind every defeat. Meanwhile, light years away aboard the human command vessel Resolute Star, the real cause of the Zarnak disruption worked in silence. In a dim room filled with holographic displays, Dr. Amina Vera stood with her cyber warfare team. Streams of alien code danced across the screens, each line unraveling pieces of the Zarnak systems. Her fingers moved fast, eyes focused. They built their systems too rigid, she muttered to her team. That's their weakness. We inject the right data streams and it falls apart on its own. Amina had spent her life studying Dominion strategies. She wasn't a soldier with a gun. She was a warrior of data, someone who understood how to fight wars without firing a single shot. Now, her work was becoming the backbone of humanity's resistance. The Zarnak still believed in brute force. Their fleets were massive, their weapons powerful, but they relied on systems that didn't know how to bend. Humans didn't have the same numbers, but they didn't need them. They were bending the rules, breaking through digital walls and making the enemy stumble with every move. Back on the Vindicator, another wave of panic struck the crew. "We're being jammed," a comms officer shouted. "I can't get a clear signal to Sector 3. Varric stared at the screen as another piece of their offensive plan fell apart. His ships were out of position. The reinforcements were stuck without guidance. Everything was falling apart, not because of some grand battle, but because they couldn't hold their formation. "This is not coincidence," he said under his breath. "This is calculated." Torvin stormed back into the command room, his eyes filled with rage. "We are not losing this war to tricks and shadows. Launch a full-force strike. Every remaining unit hits the outer colonies. Crush them with sheer power." Varric hesitated. "Sir, we don't even know where their fleet is. If we move blindly, we could fall into a trap." "Then so be it," Torvin roared. "A cornered animal fights the hardest. Let them show their fangs." Even as his words echoed, the reality became clear. This was no longer a straightforward war. It had become a game of deception, patience, and misdirection, and humanity was winning it. On the human side, Captain Darius Holt stood over a glowing tactical display. His calm voice guided the fleet like a steady current. "Let them come," he said quietly. "They think they can overwhelm us. Let's make sure they see what we've prepared." His crew didn't cheer. They nodded, sharp and focused. They trusted Holt because he didn't speak with fire. He spoke with purpose. Each move was part of a larger design, a quiet web tightening around the Dominion. Amina Varys's team had just planted a false data stream, suggesting a human base on the edge of an asteroid field. Predictably, the Zarnak ships rushed toward it, right into an ambush. Hidden within the asteroid shadows, a squadron of human, stealth fighters powered up. Their engines barely hummed as they glided out, releasing a coordinated strike on the Zarnak's exposed supply vessels. Explosions lit up the void like falling stars. On the Vindicator, alarms blared again. "Our convoy has been hit. Sector 5 is lost." Varric clenched his fists. "We're not fighting an army," he whispered. "We're fighting an idea. An idea that adapts faster than we do." And he was right. Each time the Dominion tried to tighten their grip, humanity slipped through like sand. Each time they struck, they found not weakness but calculation. Captain Holt's strategy wasn't just to win battles, it was to shift the war's shape entirely. Dr. Amina Varys looked at the data rolling in and smiled for the first time in weeks. "We're not just surviving," she said. "We're leading." In every echo of a failed Zarnak strike, in every broken transmission, there was a message written in silence. "You underestimated us." Now the echoes were growing louder, and the Dominion was finally starting to listen. The wind moved through the ruins like a whisper afraid to be heard. It twisted between the broken stones, stirred the dry leaves, and carried secrets that hadn't been spoken aloud in decades. Beneath the crumbling walls of what had once been a proud city, silence reigned, but not the peaceful kind. This silence had weight. It pressed against the skin, nestled in the bones, and made you think twice before stepping too loudly. It was the kind of silence that felt like it was listening. Jonas didn't like being underground, especially not here. The tunnels beneath the city weren't natural. They had been carved out carefully, deliberately, as if someone had known they would need them one day. The walls were lined with smooth stone, dark with age, and the air had a damp, old smell to it, like forgotten books and wet iron. His flashlight flickered as he stepped forward, the beam cutting a narrow path through the gloom. Every sound he made echoed too loudly. His boots on the floor, his breath, even the quiet creak of his jacket. He wasn't alone, though that should have been a comfort. It wasn't. Maren walked ahead of him, her steps quick, purposeful. She didn't seem scared, though he knew better. She was the kind of person who got quiet when she was afraid, and right now, she was practically silent. That didn't sit right with Jonas. "You think they're still down here?" he asked, voice low. It bounced around the tunnel like a nervous child running in circles. Maren didn't stop walking. "I don't think," she said. "I know." Well, that wasn't ominous at all. Jonas sighed and adjusted the strap on his shoulder. The pack was heavier than it had been an hour ago, mostly with artifacts they probably shouldn't have touched. But Maren insisted they needed them to figure out what had happened here. And maybe she was right. The surface world was useless for answers. Everything up there had been scrubbed clean, stories rewritten, evidence buried. Down here, though, here was truth. Ugly, quiet, patient truth. The tunnels twisted like a snake with a headache, veering left, then right, then splitting into multiple paths before merging again in odd angles. It was like walking through someone's memory, disjointed, vague, filled with things that didn't make sense until you looked at them sideways. Symbols carved into the walls glowed faintly under their lights, some of them still wet as if they'd just been drawn. That was a bit unsettling. At one turn, the tunnel opened into a wide chamber. The walls curved up and around like the inside of a dome, and in the center stood a single stone pillar. On it, something metallic shimmered. Maren stepped forward without hesitation. Jonas hesitated with all the hesitation of someone who's seen too many horror movies. "You ever stop and think maybe this is a trap?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at the whole scene. Maren didn't look back. "Of course it's a trap," she said. "Everything worth finding is." That was deeply unhelpful, but annoyingly poetic. As she reached the pillar, her hand hovered over the metal object, an amulet shaped like an eye with an empty center. The moment her fingers brushed it, the silence broke. Not in a loud way. There was no explosion, no sudden collapse, no dramatic ghostly moan. No, the silence broke like thin glass under pressure, a soft cracking sound that made the hairs on the back of Jonas's neck stand up. The air around them shifted. It felt thicker. He took a step back, then stopped, unsure if retreating was any smarter than staying put. The walls began to hum, faint at first, like distant music played on broken strings. It was low and discordant, more felt than heard. Maren stood very still, holding the amulet in both hands now, eyes wide. Jonas moved beside her, trying not to panic, though his body had other ideas. "Maren," he said, "please tell me this is part of the plan." She blinked slowly, like someone waking up from a dream. "No plan," she whispered. "But this is it. This is what we were meant to find." "Well," Jonas said, "I vote we unfind it." But before he could move, the hum grew louder, and the walls began to pulse with faint light. Shapes emerged from the stone, figures, tall and faceless, their outlines flickering like flame. They didn't move, but their presence filled the chamber as if they had always been there, just waiting, watching, listening. Jonas reached for Maren's arm, but she didn't flinch. She stepped closer to the nearest figure, her voice barely audible. "They're not angry," she said. "They're waiting for someone to listen." "I'd rather send a strongly worded letter," Jonas muttered, but he didn't pull her back. The silence hadn't gone away. It had only changed. It was no longer the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of something old and powerful holding its breath. The amulet pulsed in Maren's hands and the shapes shimmered brighter. And in that moment, Jonas realized something simple and terrifying. This wasn't just beneath the city. This was beneath everything, beneath history, beneath memory, beneath all the noise people made trying to forget. This was where the truth lived, and the truth had just woken up.